your body can burn fat, it's not going to send you hunger signals.
I could logically say there's maybe a potential psychological piece to this, right? The ability to experience hunger and have control over it is a mind strength that you need to feel hungry. You don't choose to be hungry, and you don't choose when to be hungry. Our ancestors never counted calories.
What is the minimum that you need to do to see real change and real results?
Human beings are supposed to have some amount of food chatter if you really think about what it is, cravings for food. It is abnormal to have zero.
So I wanted to start with this patient submission because it really resonated with me, and I know it's going to hit close to home with our audience right here because it's both a health and a economical question. Here we go. I want to know what kind of results I can expect as someone who doesn't have the financial means to do anything long term. I see value in learning weight maintenance, but in today's climate, any additional expense is difficult. And I want to know how you could help me, even if it's just for a few months.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think that's a very fair question that most people are going to be asking, whether vocally or to themselves. And first, I'll say the results are very powerful. Our patients are usually getting about 1% to 1.5% of body weight per week. But I want to start with number one, like the most important thing that we have to cover is being all in. And this doesn't just apply to my program. This is anything. Like when you start something, you need to be all in. You know, this concept of being halfway in or 75% in or 25% in, you're literally shooting yourself in the foot and making it much more difficult for yourself to get ideal results because you're not all in. So if that means you need more time to feel 100% about being all in, then take your time. Don't start. If you're talking to my initial case managers or you're looking at starting some other program, there's going to be an upfront person whose job is to sign you up. Like, I get that, right? Like you're aware of that. And they help you if they're a good salesperson, overcome barriers and get into a good two-way communication with you and lead you to the point where you think this is the best decision for you and then you execute. But unfortunately, a lot of people will make this decision and they just don't feel 100% about it. And I get it. That's not your fault. Maybe you're just scared and afraid. And so my advice would be, number one, figure out what you need to do so that you don't have that fear, so that you don't have that concern, so that you can be all in. Because if you're not all in, that is going to affect the results and make it harder for me to confidently say you're going to lose in my program about 1% to 1.5% of lasting weight loss. You will get better results. And I can say if you go all in, right? And if that means that it takes you a bit longer to make your decision, then take your time. Like we don't, and I think most people delivering some sort of service would agree, like you make that decision as much as we are trying to motivate you and problem solve and handle barriers. The reality is, let's also ensure that your mindset is ready to execute and that you are ready to roll. So I think that's number one. And then getting into number two, the mechanics of what we do with our coaching programs, specifically the FLOA Protocol, as you know very well, we're implementing the FLOA Protocol. And it's just a matter of what tier, what ladder, what level of support. And the one that I recommend wholeheartedly to most people is the FLOA Warrior, because you get that guarantee of maintenance, you get that customization for me, which I think makes a huge difference. If people had the ability to do it on their own with the right information, I think there'd be a lot more people out there doing better. So that FLOA Warrior program, I really think for the value that you're getting, the ability for me to customize it for $750 for 3 months. We get to customize it. We get on that intro Zoom. It's a really small Zoom. They're very intimate. And I spend as much time as I can to ensure that, because we give the patients an initial break, lay down of everything you need to do, tell them to read it. You know, and sometimes that's just part of you do this, some authority, right? And then they get in the Zoom and then it's okay, 80% adherence to the homework. And then I get them through the rest. And I stay on that initial Zoom with my patients until I think that they feel like they're ready to roll. And they also feel that they're ready to roll, an initial starting point. And then at that point, it's the accountability, the week by week coaching calls that I do with them to ensure that they're implementing, that we're course correcting when they need to. And that fact that they have access to us to be able to utilize the support that they may need during times of, because we all know that life's going to present some difficulties and some frustrations and some hiccups and some issues, and it's okay. That's why one of my favorite statements always is, it's okay if you fall off the horse. What's not okay is not jumping back on. So Why would you do that when you're in a community of support, both for me, my staff, and the community? We have some warriors in there that, like, at this point, I'm almost considering hiring because they pretty much already work for us. They love us. And I think it's because of what we've been able to do.
Yeah.
So I think in summary, there has to be trust. There has to be a leap of faith. And I think the program that we figured out, truthfully, is the best value that somebody can get right now from the programs that I've seen that gives the tools that a person needs to be able to execute on the proper lifestyle implementation. Because we've talked about this before in the past, like the medications, the peptides are the initial barrier slashers, right? They are the things that allow us to start this game of weight loss, but then it's the coaching and the implementation of the lifestyle. So I think we've really got the structure down to be able to help patients, and we have the certainty, and I think that's why our success rate is so high.
Okay. I'm going to challenge you a bit. Jeff obviously isn't here. I'm going to be his advocate. So if you don't mind putting you on the hot seat.
Yeah.
If he says, okay, I get what you're saying generally, but be specific. What am I going to learn in 3 months? What am I going to walk away with that I didn't have before?
Okay. Let's start. I'm going to be specific with the summary of the goal, and then we can move in as specific as you want. But truthfully, what we intend our patients to walk away from in 3-month program, which is our starter tier FLOA Warrior program. We talked about that earlier. You can go certainly beyond 3 months. Some people do, but I'd say economically, that's where a lot of people land. They want more, but that's where a lot of people land because of finances. So with the 3-month program, besides getting your peptides, AOD, which we talked about that, fat mobilizing peptides, you get your tirzepatide, and that's all great. But aside from that, in 3 months, what we can expect, most people aren't going to hit their weight loss goal in 3 months. We know that. At least the population we're dealing with, we're talking average 50, 60 pounds weight loss, significantly a lot more in many patients. And so you're going to walk away with the percentage of your body fat loss. That's number one. Number two, you're going to walk away with the habits that you've been implementing, that I've been helping you implement, specific habits that are all centered around helping your body to reduce / eliminate. I want to be careful with my verbiage because eliminate, we don't have literature to say this, but address. I'm comfortable with address. That you're going to walk away with a set of habits that are now part of your lifestyle that are all centered around addressing those underlying factors that drive obesity. And there's a lot, right? But the big three are insulin resistance, inflammation, and metabolic flexibility. So the only way you're going to be successful to wean off, which is pretty much the main objective most people come to us for nowadays, is that you have to replace the tool, right? The tool that got you initially started, the medication, specifically tirzepatide, GLPs. They go in there and they immediately reduce insulin resistance, which is great. But that's a temporary effect of a drug. If you want to get off the drug without the insulin resistance going right back to where it was at before, you have to lean on lifestyle choices, right? And so everything we do is centered around helping patients to implement those lifestyle choices that target insulin resistance, that target inflammation, and target metabolic flexibility issues. And I'll go through the pillars here really quick. The pillars in order of priority that would help the most amount of people with these specific issues. So tied at the top, because it's hard for me to say which one's more important. Again, there's no data, but you have the FLOA Protocol, which is essentially the world's most aggressive format of fasting. This very well. We get our patients into a 36, 48-hour weekly fast. I would say that is up there and tied with just simply reducing the percentage of the food that you consume from processed. So I tell people Paleo-Mediterranean, but really I can call the diet that I coach patients on as the anti-processed food diet. All we're trying to do is say, hey, let's reduce the percentage of processed foods to 10%. Give me that during the program. I don't want 100-0. I don't want you going hardcore. And I'll actually have some people get surprised when I say that. But so we got the diet and the fasting hands down. That's probably 75% of everything. It's an arbitrary number, but that's 70 to 70 around there. Then we got the resistance training component, getting a solid resistance training regimen in. Then we got the whole carb deal. And I say the whole carb deal because We put them on a keto diet for a couple months, but then we transition into a carb cycling or cyclic ketogenic lifestyle. Am I saying there's something scientifically magical about cyclic ketogenic? I think there is, but because we don't have data to back that up, I'm happy with saying maybe there's nothing magical happening from cycling your carbs from a physiological reaction, but maybe it's just the fact that your weekly carbs being lower is easier to happen if you just have days where, okay, here's my keto days. And how easy is it to lower your carbs on days when you're working, right? It's the same concept of why fasting is easier during the week. 85% of my patients follow the same lifestyle I do. It's like, I like to live more on the weekends. I'm lifting my weights on the weekends, and their strategy behind lifting and eating carbs on the same days. But those are the days where I'm eating more overall. Those are the days where I'm getting more carbs, and those are the days when I'm lifting weights. So that's, we could talk later about why that's so magical, but cycling carbs, okay? Then finally, we have just implementing an optimal supplement regimen. That's huge. That's huge. I'd have to say, like, 1 out of 5 people that come to us are in a optimal supplement regimen, meaning they every morning wake up, take supplements, every PM take supplements, right? That's huge. And I'm like, that's so easy to do. Like, it's easier to take pills than it is to go exercise. So let's get that in. And then finally, optimizing your stress, optimizing your sleep. Of course, there are, like, those are the pillars, right? And really, I should have thrown inflammation in there. So inflammation is its own pillar. But that's, if we focus on those, which is what we do, I think that's the key to addressing the underlying issues that drive obesity. And obesity is the presentation of food chatter and the inability of your body to maintain that weight loss. So we are so hardcore about focusing on that by the time they get to their weight loss goal, they're able to successfully wean off the medications. And so for us, even at that 3-month mark, if that's all they're getting medication peptide wise, our continual coaching is very affordable. We got a $10 a month program. We got a $100 a month program, depending on tiers. But at that point, I will happily continue to work with a patient if that's all they can afford. And I feel like for most people, I've observed that we've made enough changes in their physiology to where they can continue to get more weight loss to eventually hit their goal and then eventually maintain. Quick minute here. I wanted to tell you guys about the free resources that I have. There's a link in the show notes is going to give you a way to join the free Facebook community where we'll do weekly live coaching all about the weight loss medications, on them, without them, whatever it is. We're going to help you hit your goals. And there's a free PDF too as well, which breaks down the step-by-step so that you know exactly what to do and when to do it. And we'll see you back in the show.
Okay. You brought up supplements in that. And there was a brilliant lecture by Dr. Rhonda Byrne. I followed her for 7-8 years.
Yeah,
and she was talking
amazing.
about, she is. It was the 3 most essential supplements. And it was fish oil, it was magnesium, whether that's glycinate, 3-in-8, different conversation, and it was vitamin D. Now, obviously, we know that she knows what she's talking about, and we've seen the changes correlated in labs, right? We've seen the effect of that. But maybe about a month ago, there was a podcast on Diary of a CEO, and this scientist said after analyzing all of the metadata that supplements had 0 effect on long-term health, which hilarious to us, but this is a guy who has an audience of millions. So this question from Emily, what makes you trustworthy?
So is that related to, so that was just a backstory related to this question. Okay, but you're not asking me my opinion on that.
You happen to bring up supplements, made me think of Dr. Rhonda Patrick. And then the next question literally from Emily was, what makes you trustworthy in this environment where there's a specialist on every block, it seems. And more importantly, everyone is contradicting each other. Why should someone listen to you?
Okay, cool. We could totally talk about the supplement thing later. I think that's a great topic. Okay, multiple angles. I think there's a lot of pieces to this. Like my initial just gut reaction is because I care. I care to my core. And my clinics where we provide more than just weight loss services, the mission statement has always been reducing prescriptions, preventing surgeries, restoring optimal health. But weight loss, though, out of all the services we do and have done over the years, logically is much more emotional for me because of my backstory. Very well, I lost 100 pounds and I struggled to keep it off for over a decade. And even beyond that decade, I still had moments of instability because every single year I seem to get a little better. And I know firsthand what it's like to feel like you can't control your body's fitness level, your body's health level. And that sucks. I'm a little neurotic, right? It's the business manager sense of me. I like to control things, right? Like the definition of control that I prefer more, there's a lot of definitions of control, but the ability to start something, change it, and stop it, to me, is a great definition of control. So to really applying that, I didn't have control over my body. I couldn't maintain fitness levels. Maintaining it, I knew how to get it done, because it was just real quick. It was like an annual thing where, springtime, I would drop about 40, 50 pounds and then get ready for summer, enjoyed summer, felt good about my shirt off. And then winter came around, gained it all back. And then it was just this cycle. So I knew how to semi-control it, right? But ultimately, the ideal control was just staying in shape. I could never do that until 10 years later when I discovered fasting. And then I just kept pushing the envelope with prolonged fasting. And then the introduction of peptides and these awesome GLP-1 medications just really were icing on the cake for me. But knowing how much of a struggle it is, and then I have this whole other perspective too, right? And I don't see enough weight loss coaches talking about that. So number one reason, my backstory. Number one reason, that fuels my passion. I can see things from the patient's viewpoint. I know exactly what they're going, and I have to live this lifestyle. So inevitably, I'm in it, right? For more than just money. Like, I don't want anybody to have to go through that. And I'm constantly always researching the latest and greatest ways, because that leads me to number two. So this other category here, which is the biggest focus of what people come to us for, is just trying to achieve a healthy body fat percentage. There's a given and an inherent amount of effort that each person has to take in order to accomplish that, right? There's effort, right? We have, and human beings have, a limited amount of effort or attention or marbles, like whatever you want to call them, that we can apply in any given moment. And depending on where you're at in your life, the stressors of what's going on, that's going to affect how much attention. Like there's a funny saying that you could be driving on a freeway going 40 miles, no, maybe let's say 55 miles per hour, 55 or 60. And how much attention are you really paying attention to the road? 25, 30%, because it's so robotic, right? But all of a sudden now, for whatever reason, you have to be driving 110 miles per hour, 120. How much of your attention units are you paying in that moment? Significantly more, right? So we, and I don't want to get too esoteric on this, but I happen to believe this ideology, philosophy, spiritual kind of viewpoint where we're not our bodies, we're the thing that runs our bodies. And so we can exercise some amount of control over our body, meaning the moment where a gun's pointed at our head, or if we're looking face to face with a tiger, we can get a lot more attention units in that moment and handle whatever's in front of us. But that's also extremely stressful on the body and very unsustainable. And so we should be asking the question, not what can be done to lose weight, but the question should be, what can be done that's actually sustainable over a long period of time. Otherwise, it's pointless, because we can, like I said, musk up an extreme amount of effort and motivation and intention, but it's short-lived because it's not sustainable, right? So for me, I've just thought that way my entire life. And then when I look back, if someone asks me, why did you struggle so much to stay in shape? Besides the whole fact that I didn't know about the hormonal basis of, that's a big piece of it too as well. Like I wasn't fasting. I didn't know about that. But what I was doing was just not sustainable. I never wanted to put that much attention over being healthy. It was not that important to me. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't prioritize our health. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we're limited. Like, we would all love to prioritize our health, but we have to prioritize it within the responsibilities of everything else that we have on our plate. We got spouses, we got children, we got jobs, we got all and financial crises. And
what are those?
Yeah, it was like right now, nobody feels good about either presidential candidate, right? So it's a stressful world we live in. And so you have to live within that, right? So bodybuilders is a great example to portray what I'm talking about. That's an example of what's on the table. But you notice that a bodybuilder doesn't do much anything else. That's their life. And no disrespect to bodybuilders. I've never done a show myself, and I've always said I wanted to. And it just always, for me personally, always found itself lower on my priority list of what I wanted to accomplish. Take that for what it is. But I think most people, again, now we could take that bodybuilder analogy and just look at, I just want to be healthy, right? Like I'm 50 pounds overweight. I have high blood pressure. They're telling me I got to take cholesterol medication. I'm pre-diabetic. I just want to be healthy. Okay, great. But I cannot prioritize that over everything else. And so I've always thought that way. And I would say that's, in addition to my passion, that's the number 2 reason that my entire, like one of the big driving factors behind the creation of the FLOA protocol and the FLOA lifestyle, which is how people maintain weight after my program, was exactly how can I make this as easy as possible? I always tell people, it's not that I want you to be lazy. That's one criticism I get. Or you're not teaching people to be more responsible. You're teaching them to be lazy. No, I'm being practical. Mm-hmm. I'm being real. I provide a ton of additional things you can do for the people that want to take it to the next level, like high intensity training, a lot of specific type of explosive workouts. If you want to take it to the next level, we can help you. But that's probably, let's be real, 2% of the population. Mm-hmm. The other 98% just wants a format that they can follow that helps them to get healthy, gets them there, and they can do it and still live a life outside of health. And that's, to me, that's blissful. I just saying it right now, I could literally feel a change. And I know it sounds a little, hopefully you can believe me when I say this, but that felt good just answering that question to you.
What was your gauntlet? What was the time in your life that was the darkest from a health perspective, when it was 5 o'clock in the morning cardio, 2-a-day workouts, lift, still do your 20 minutes of cardio after, meal prep every single day? At what point did you tell yourself, this just isn't something I can do every single day for the rest of my life? Because I'm sure people look at you, and I do, I hear this from patients. They see you as like this, okay, this is years ahead of where I could ever be. But we both know that's not true. Talk about that, the mentality of almost being defeated, and what got you out of that.
Are you talking about back way when I was first losing my weight?
Yeah.
So when I was first losing my weight, actually, okay, so the way I lost, I want to make sure I understand your question. So when I lost my weight, it was not the hormonal basis, right? Calories. This was over 20 years ago. So like you said, it required an extreme amount of effort centered around counting calories, counting macros, meal prep, scheduling out the time where I can eat 4 to 6 meals a day, cardio in the morning, going to school, lifting weights after school, and then going to work. I mean, it was insane. I had no social life, right? It was easy for me to make that choice to do that because I didn't have a social life to begin with. So I actually think that if I was popular and had a social life, how much harder would it have been to do that? That's insane. So I think for me, it was easier to start that program because I wasn't sociable. I was insecure. I was unhappy. And so I just, for some reason, had to get over 300 pounds before the light bulb flashed and I was like ready to take action. Mm-hmm. So I lost 100 pounds. But then, like you were saying earlier, if this is what you...
How much up and down, and what led you to that point where you realized there has to be another answer?
Okay, gotcha. So now we fast forward. For the longest time, so now we're talking about like the 10 years where I was zigzagging. Mm-hmm. Okay. So for the longest time, I ended up just, because so now I'm in my late teens, early 20s, managing gyms, and I didn't know of any other solution, right? So this is not only what it took for me to lose weight, was this really intense effort where I pretty much had to prioritize it over everything else, but all my personal trainers, between the 15 to 20 trainers and all the clients, hundreds of clients, it was the same deal. It was very repetitive pattern of people getting serious, losing weight, and then we see them back in 3 to 9 months. And this is just how it was. We did our best to preach like, no, you got to stay consistent. But we knew that people were just not going to be able to maintain it. In fact, now that I've combed through the data, it's about 1 out of 5 people that actually are successful at maintaining. 1 out of 5. So you're basically a unicorn, right? So you guys watching this, if you actually know somebody who has maintained, say, 20, 30 pounds weight loss over more than 2 to 3 years, that's a unicorn.
20%.
And you need to go study what they're doing, because there's actually data that they've studied. What are the characteristics among individuals who have sustained weight loss beyond 2 to 3 years? Because we want to know, right? It's a very logical thing to study, and it's not going to blow your mind. But what they found were very calorie conscious people. They never stopped thinking about calories. They never stopped exercising. They always had cognitive strategies to keep themselves positive during stressful times, and they never stopped putting attention on it. So does that sound all too familiar to what I said earlier? Like, what percentage of our life do we want to be hyper-focused on that? Mm-hmm. And look, I'm not good for them. That's that David Goggins-like mindset. What's important to me, I'm going to prioritize it. But for the rest of us, again, it's not that we don't want to prioritize it. It's the fact that we can't, given all the other responsibilities. Mm-hmm. So that's, anyways, so going back to what you were saying, this is, for me at that point in my life, I just accepted that this is what it took. And I almost got to a point, I remember, where I didn't get mad at myself. I did because I wanted, this process was just frustrating, but all the other responsibilities I had in my life, I didn't beat myself up too much about it. And then we fast forward, and the breaking point, if that's what you were asking, was when I first learned about fasting. That's when I had the first tool that I was able to slip into my lifestyle that didn't take up more of my time. In fact, it actually gave me more time and just made the bar, so to speak, this metaphorical bar that represents how much effort is it to maintain weight. All of a sudden that bar lowered significantly. Nothing came close until prolonged fasting, until I pushed it to a year or two later. I took my intermittent fasting and I started doing prolonged fasting, and then I started doing prolonged fasting more frequently, which you could say was stage 3, because even today, the biggest experts in fasting, the Mindy Pells, the Jason Fungs, the Dr. Bergs, none of them say what I say. And I'm not comparing myself to those guys. And ladies, I have so much respect for them, and I hope one day to get to that point. But I do say that I took a leap after what I've did to myself and created this protocol because and now I've been doing it on patients for the past 10 years. So now I have a bit of a track record and comfort level, and doing so much blood chemistry analysis and looking at health markers and seeing nothing but improvement after improvement, that here we are now today. But yeah, it took really realizing that we got to focus on fasting, which now I understand the reason why fasting works is because of the way it affects your hormones. And we could talk about that later. But
if your body can burn fat, it's not going to send you hunger signals. Not as much.
I absolutely. I think that's a huge piece to it. Yes.
Now, it's amazing how these kind of all tie into each other. This is from Krishna. Dr. Jones, I'm someone who's the definition of an emotional eater. I can be great for weeks and sometimes even months, and then something happens in my life that completely throws me for a loop. And ultimately, I find comfort in the food in front of me. It's always been my best friend for my entire life. How could someone like me actually hope to end this cycle?
It's great. It's great. Deep question. And I think there's 2 ways to approach it. There's the literal, less real, and then there's the practical, more real. So the literal, more real is that could be broken up into the fact that is a symptom of obesity, right? That is one of the symptoms of food chatter. And finally, society is acknowledging obesity as a real disease. And so how much of that she's describing is pure disease, that gets even more nuanced, because what is disease? Is it 100% genetics? Is it 100% lifestyle? And we definitely have many shows to do coming up about that. But I happen to think it's 50-50, 50 lifestyle, 50 genetics. But so we have that piece of it. And then we have this unknown, I did a podcast with, or it was a TikTok live. We're going to do a podcast, but it was a very prominent psychologist who works with post-traumatic stress issues. And so we talked a little bit about the mental piece of it, but there's potentially, because it's not my specialty, but I could logically say there may be a potential psychological piece to this, right? And so you should explore that. If you have the energy and desire to explore that, I think it's very reasonable to say you might completely rid yourself of that, and it's completely psychological. Okay, great. Now, practically, if I took 100 people, that's not what I'm preaching, because I don't feel too much confidence in that, but certainly it's a possibility, okay? So now we get to the more practical, real-world solution that I have for people for Krishna. Okay, so I think we have to accept the fact that we may always have a certain amount of desire to eat yummy things. And I say it like that because I still do. And I don't use, I try, that's a horrible thing in science to use one example and think it, but I think most people would logically say, when you beat this disease, obesity, how much are you beating it? Some people never have that. Like the people that never have the disease, like we've observed over many people, that they just look at food as energy, right? And it's just never, yeah, they enjoy delicious things, but it's never been an issue. It's like self-control doesn't even require that much effort because they don't have food chatter. The best way to describe it is if we could give a food chatter scale, right? 0 to 10, there's some people that have 0. And then there's people that are like floating between 0 and 4. And then we start getting beyond 4. And that's when we start calling it obesity, right? So there's a certain amount of inherent food chatter. And I think number one in this practical, my real world solution is accepting the fact that I'm probably never going to get that to 0 for you. Mm-hmm. Minus the scenario where you load up on GLP-1 medications. Like when they first came, I was excited to see what 0 felt like. So I tried it and I experimented with it, and it's crazy. It's wild. It's surreal to be able to take this drug and feel 0 food chatter, to feel 0 hunger. But I'm here to tell you that's not good for many reasons. You need to feel hunger. It is normal to feel hunger. I think people forgot that a normal, healthy body has its own internal faculties and systems regulated by hormones, but governed by your regulatory systems in your brain and executed by the hormones, I should say, that allow a person without conscious effort to maintain a healthy body weight, right? You have hunger cues that drive you to eat, and you don't got to think about it. You don't choose to be hungry, and you don't choose when to be full. And you have hunger cues that tell you when you're full, right? Our ancestors never counted calories. Like animals don't. Like this is not supposed to be a required thing. Yet here we are saying that for humans it's required. Again, the why, I would say it's required to a certain extent too at this point with where we're at, but it's not supposed to be, right? So if we can address those issues and bring your body back to homeostasis, bring your body back to that balance, and many different, I would say, not religions, but many different styles of holistic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, acupuncture, for example, medicines that have been around for thousands of years. They all talk about this in different, even chiropractic philosophy talks about it and calls it innate intelligence. Like there's a huge difference between allopathic and holistic medicine as a whole. The biggest difference being we're robots. We need drugs and surgery. That's all you got. If you guys appreciate my little robotic voice. And then you have this concept over here with many thousands of years backing it up that there's this governing intelligence within bodies that are trying to return to the optimal situation. And it's these roadblocks to that, which is the development of disease. Now that we have that frame of reference regarding like the basis of that holistic approach and allopathic approach, going back to the food chatter, right? So I brought that up because I wanted to emphasize that if we can focus, and this is what the FLOA Protocol does, on optimizing the hormones, right? Which is treating the obesity, at least from my perspective and clinical opinion, then the food chatter reduces. So the goal is always, after we get them started, use the medications and peptides, get them rolling into the lifestyle, right? Is that we'll say the non-drug affected food chatter, because it completely changes when you're on the medications, which is what we needed to start. But if there was a second scale that we could try to objectify, which is, or be objective about, is how much is her food chatter going to be when she's off, right? That bar, we can't measure until she gets off and we test it. But that bar I know is lowering how much it is. And so as we progress more and more, and then she finally gets off the medication, her food chatter is going to be much lower. Like we talked about a scale in the beginning, 0 to 10, the most obese, highest amount of food chatter, 10, and 0, literal nothing. I'm just trying to get her food chatter to that 0 to 3 range. Because I think, and again, this is arbitrary, but there's a range down here. It's supposed to be normal, right? Human beings are supposed to have some amount of food chatter if you really think about what it is, cravings for food. It is abnormal to have 0. So we're just taking an abnormal amount of food chatter. If I really had to I like summarizing it that way, but we're taking an abnormal food chatter and just bringing it down to a normal chatter so that she can sustain that, right? That's the goal. And we help her do it, like I said, by giving her what she needs initially to start, which is the drugs, the medications, the GLP-1 meds, but then it's the coaching. It's the mindset coaching specifically, literally reminding patients that you're going to have to be hungry again. For the last 3 months, because here's the interesting thing, right? When you take these medications, you don't really get to land on a dose based off of how hungry you are or not. No, you don't. You basically land on a dose that's enough of a food chatter reduction, right, and then you don't have the side effects too much. That's all that goes into it. There is no, let's tweak the dose a little bit because I want to be a little bit more hungrier.
Right.
It would be amazing if we had that, because I actually want them. The ability to experience hunger and have control over it is a mind strength, if you will.
And necessary.
It's 100% necessary. So it's interesting, but my patients that struggle a little bit more at the end of the protocol to get off of it are the ones that, because I started asking this question, like during the program, rating your food chatter and hunger, what was it? It was low, like 1, 2, 3. And the ones that were having to tolerate, but exercise that mental within to be able to, they went from 8 to 5, and they were okay with that. They trained their mind. They have an easier time weaning off. And I use David Goggins as an example, right? That he sets the bar for humans as mental toughness, but we have to exercise some amount of mental training. And I feel confident that our program does that.
And at the very least, it sounds like we're just turning the volume down. Right?
Making it controllable. I like that. Turning the volume down. Exactly.
Good. This last one was verbal. You know them because they give us olive oil and vinegar. We have a patient who says that their parent could absolutely use a program like this and lose weight, but they see it as a shortcut. And they mentioned that they had said the same thing about gastric bypass. So you have someone who's in need, who is in a health condition that warrants being addressed immediately, but call it right, call it wrong, still has the mental block where they see any assistance like this as being quote unquote cheating. And I'm sure there are tons of people in the same boat where they want to gently nudge someone in the right direction that they care about, but there's that negative stigma. Especially when you hear drug or you hear about these peptides, what advice would you give to that person?
Quick minute here. I wanted to tell you guys about my free resources to help you guys with your sustainable weight loss goals. I have a free Facebook community where I do weekly live coaching. It's all about helping you hit your goals and maintain your weight for the rest of your life. And I also have a free PDF where I break down step by step exactly what it takes for you to be successful. I'll put a link to this in the show, and we'll see you guys back in the show.
To be clear, what advice would I give to the person?
Either one. You could be talking directly to the parent. What would you tell to our patients, the daughter of the parent?
Regarding my opinion, utilizing the bariatric surgery as a solution?
Regarding just getting over the mental block of, it's okay to do this. This isn't some cheat. This is something that's going to hurt you. This isn't, or anything just to be ashamed of.
The it being like GLP-1 medications?
Yes.
Or the it? Okay, great. So I want to make sure. And yeah, I think you've probably seen all the celebrity endorsements, Oprah, Kelly Clarkson, Charles Barkley. He's an outspoken man. He goes, yeah, my fat ass lost 75 pounds on Monjaro. Good for him. I do bet he's going to struggle, though. I do bet a lot of these celebrities, you're going to see them on these medications long term because they haven't found my program yet. And I mean that to not sound conceited, but and we'll talk about this in greater extent on future episodes together, but the medications will require long-term adherence unless you implement something to replace them. And we talked about that, the lifestyle. So anyways, but going back to using this and feeling guilty about it, there's no reason to feel guilty about it. Look, the guilt, this is an easy one. The guilt comes from the fact that society, almost still, but a lot less, has always viewed obesity as not a disease problem, as a problem within. Stop, put down the fork, you fat, you know what, and go exercise, right? Literal, it's a little extreme, but that's what the mentality has been. And I think doctors have always scratched their head with stop eating, like what's going on? But and the irony and all that is our effort to beat this has always been methods to address that calorie viewpoint, right? And it's never worked. And I think that's why the hormonal basis is starting to become significantly more popular. But these medications are real world tools. And this is probably in my career being so holistically rooted, generally sane, and taking this approach where we don't need medication. But I've always had that ability to embrace science. And so I'm okay with when necessary has always been my philosophy. But this medication I've embraced wholeheartedly because I'm so intimately intertwined and sympathetic to because of my personal experience, to obesity and to how much of a struggle this is. Mm-hmm. So look, obesity is a disease. We gotta get that out of our thought process, that if we disagree with it, like, it's always been a disease. Great book that explains it. I published it in my book, Fast, Feast, and Flourish, but that was a lot more than the basis of obesity. The Obesity Code is the best book, hands down, by Dr. Jason Fung, if you really want to get into the science of obesity. But look, obesity is a disease. We can have a conversation about what contributes to that, genetics and lifestyle, but ultimately, and then really, we can get really nuances. What's the definition of a disease? Keeping it simple for me, when I talk to patients, I'm always saying, look, a disease in this sense, it's not a genetic disease, right? We think of something like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, where there's nothing you can do, a purely genetic disease that you're just going to live with that. Okay, fine. This is not the same thing. But a disease that I describe to patients is something, and I explain it like I'm talking to a 3-year-old, but a disease is something that means you are going to have to try harder than others, which means that's the reason why for you've never been able to do it on your own. And that's why these medications are a real tool that nobody should feel guilty about. But my concern is they are creating laziness. And I want to be careful with the word laziness. It's not your fault, but the reality is every system in your body becomes weaker if you don't train it. There's atrophy to your muscles if you stop lifting weights. There is a decrease in metabolic flexibility when you stop intermittent fasting or stop doing your ketogenic diet. I remember in high school, I was phenomenal at algebra. And the other day, I was like, I can't even do a freaking basic equation. I looked at an equation. Oh, I know this. And I'm like, wait a minute. I forgot it all. So you lose what you don't train. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so relating to what I was talking about earlier, you lose your ability to exercise control over your hunger based off of two things: the intensity of the medication and how much it reduced it, and the length of time that you're experiencing less hunger. This is why, as much as I love the medications and as much as you shouldn't feel guilty about needing them, I think you should also take it a step beyond just let me get on and lose weight, but you should also take it to the point of how can I get to the point where I don't need them? You should walk into this with at least some consideration over that. You don't have to have faith or confidence or think you're going to get there. I'll do that for you in the beginning. That's what I usually tell them. But you have to, and you should, in my opinion, be thinking what's down the road, because that will change your frame of reference of how you get into the weight loss portion of using these medications. So don't feel guilty, essentially, in summary. Use them, beat this disease, and follow a protocol that helps you to get off so that you can maintain your weight and you can maintain your health.
It's a great answer. I'm all about ROI. We know that the single greatest way to lower all-cause mortality, just your chances of dying from anything, is 3 workouts a week. You can get a 60% drop just from doing that. If you're obviously deconditioned and not healthy, just some cardiorespiratory or aerobic activity. What is the lowest common denominator? What is the minimum that you need to do to see real change and real results with fasting like this? And how long?
It differs dramatically. It differs dramatically person to person. So it's difficult to say. I can start by creating a category for you and then giving you a response. So assuming you're not diabetic and assuming you don't have any extreme inflammatory conditions or extreme cortisol hormonal issues, if we can rule those out and we're stuck with just a person who doesn't have those issues, but they're 50 plus pounds overweight, they're obviously very insulin resistant because of the aggressive nature of the FLOA protocol, where we get our patients, once we get the patients fasting for at least 24 hours, once, twice a week, that's where the magic starts to happen. Mm-hmm. Intermittent fasting, look, I'm sorry, it ain't going to cut it. It ain't going to cut it for the majority of you watching this video. It's going to cut it for a 25-year-old who just wants to go from healthy to shredded, because you could do that with intermittent fasting and it's awesome. But for the majority of people, they're too far down the obesity scale, if you will, to where intermittent fasting is not going to do much. But once we get them into the 24-hour fasts, and that for us, we categorize fasting as stage 1 is intermittent. That's your daily fast, compressing your eating window. Then we have the long fasting, which is 2 stages, stage 2 and 3. Stage 2 for our patients is doing the 24-hour fast once and then twice a week. And then finally, the flow stage, which is where the magic really happens, which is that 36 to 48 hour, one long continuous fast every single week. So once we can get them into stage 2, they'll start losing about 1% to 1.5% of body weight. It's not even that the 48 produces more weight loss than the 224s. Usually it's about the same. It's that the 148 versus 224s improves insulin resistance more, has a more anti-inflammatory effect, has a greater effect on becoming more metabolically fit. Because think about the stressor. It's much harder for your body to do one 48-hour fast than 2 24-hour fasts. Despite the calories being the same, the weight loss will be the same, but we're trying to heal the body a lot more than just trying to lose weight.
Okay. And I was thinking yesterday of all the biggest weight loss companies or organizations or options that came out since the days where we were in the industry. Phentermine, HCG, Advocare, Herbalife. When you really think about it, there's a lot. None of them had a continuity game plan. None of them, right?
No.
And that's what I thought was crazy is you look at all these things, even like Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers, I guess you walk away with the ability to count points, like a little bit more understanding about nutrition as a whole, a little bit. But anything I just named, if you were heavily involved in those for 4 years and then stopped, what would you have after?
For what the literature tells us, 4 out of 5 of those people are going to regain all their weight back. And those programs only have a program for when you're ready to re-lose the weight that you regained.
Yeah.
That's it. And so for me, I'm extremely prideful over my FLOA lifestyle group. And it's something that we're just about to launch now. Mm-hmm. I already have the group of people. I just haven't separated them and done all that. But this is probably the biggest product and biggest thing that I'm going to launch, which is my FLOA lifestyle group. So let me talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's so important. Like you said, from a bit, you don't see this, and we know why, because the literature is very clear. That it'd be a bad business move to launch some sort of weight maintenance group, because you're going to have 4 to 5 people calling you, hey, it's not working. So that's what you can always track the money. Look, the money flow is not a basis of scientific literature, but damn, it's pretty potent of cause and effect, at least. Yeah. Okay. So we're doing this. And I think that says a lot. That my lifestyle group, for $10 to $15 a month, I'm trying to play with that. And as I add more perks, it might go up to $15, $20 a month, but I think is a damn amazing price, to where what I'm going to be delivering for that group is a weekly Q&A session for them, right? A buildup of community of people who are in that group, right? There's weight loss support groups that have a little bit of this, but because they didn't do the FLOA Protocol, you have a ton of people that don't really have consistency among their ability to maintain weight. And I've seen that. This group is not going to be that. And I have no literature to defend this statement. I'm just sharing with you what's currently happening for us right now with the dang near 1,000 people that I have in that group that are successfully maintaining weight. And it's not going to be 100%. No, of course not. But what I truthfully believe at my core is the reason why that group is going to be successful, both from a business model for me, but more importantly for them, is because these people, the only way to get into my FLOA lifestyle group is that if you lost your weight via the FLOA Protocol. Because remember, losing weight, now that we have GLP-1 medications, that's easy. And I apologize if it didn't work for you, because then you're going to be like, screw you, Dr. Jones, it wasn't easy. But look, for most people, simply taking a GLP-1 and not changing anything, you're going to get weight loss. It's just what it is. But getting weight loss versus getting weight loss and making improvements to your health, specifically addressing the underlying causes of obesity, insulin resistance, inflammation, metabolic flexibility, are what matters most, and really all that matters if you want to maintain your weight loss. And so to get into our FLOA lifestyle group, you have to have done the FLOA protocol, either to lose your weight, or if you're watching this saying, oh, dang, I already lost my weight, it's okay. We actually are getting a lot more of these patients now. But if you're watching this and you're pretty much near your weight loss goal, it's totally okay. You can still do the FLOA protocol without weight loss being a goal.
Right.
Like, in fact, it's the only alteration is when you're not fasting, you're having to eat more because we need your weekly calories to keep you at maintenance. It's funny, but you can actually build muscle. You can recomp. It's not something that we even promote a lot, but we're getting a lot more of those. So it doesn't matter either scenario, as long as you've done the FLOA protocol for, I'm going to say X amount of months, right? I don't have data. I don't have literature. What I'm seeing is about 3 to 5 months, but some people will need more before they can get to that point. But in my opinion, the longer we do the FLOA protocol, which is all those pillars and tenets, the greater improvement in those underlying driving factors, and the easier it's going to be for that person to maintain weight. Remembering that, because we talked about mindset earlier, that mindset is the other piece of it, right? And every individual has their own inherent ability of how tough they are. I don't know how else to say it, because then it sounds mean, and I think you could become tougher. There's mindset training, blah, 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 blah. There's a ton of stuff you can do, but we all have this inherent amount of initial toughness that we are just able to exercise more mindset, and some and others can't. And who knows? That's not my specialty. I just observe it. But that's going to be one big piece of that program, is the continual mindset training, and the fact that there's only going to be a small percentage of people that are going to be rebounding. And what's going to be really cool about that group is we get to put that person or those people on showcase and do a group training, and everybody gets to watch me help the people. We're all paying together as a community so that I can give more attention to the people who need the help. And I think that's badass. I think that is super cool. Hey, we're all pulling in so that Dr. Jones can afford to be able to work one-on-one or in a group format for the people who need it. How awesome is that? That's community program, right? And so anyways, I'm really excited for that. And I think that, to me, to everybody watching this, should really solidify how confident I am in what the FLOA protocol is going to do, because that's going to be a very stressful situation for me if I'm completely wrong and the 80% still applies. So stay tuned for that.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely, man. Well, I definitely look forward to the next one.
Me too.